President. Alex Little joins us, defense attorney, former assistant federal prosecutor. So, Alex,
good afternoon.
Good afternoon. The focus has been on, obviously, Russia in the investigation, but we know the Southern District of New York, the federal prosecutors have been investigating the Trump Organization. Michael Cohen testified about that. What are the pitfalls, if any, for the president in that investigation?
Sure. So the whole role of impeachment in American history has not been just to prosecute the president for things he's done in office. It is, in a way, to make sure the person we have in the White House is fit for that office. And so historically, there have certainly been situations where crimes that have taken place or incidents that have taken place outside of the White House are grounds for impeachment. That was the whole basis of Whitewater, the investigation into President Clinton. So as the prosecutors in New York look at some of these business dealings, even though they're the Trump Organization and not the Trump White House, if they come across things that appear as if the president has committed a crime or has obstructed justice, those certainly could become articles of impeachment, especially in a Democratic-led Congress.
Yeah, but what are, a real estate deal or false inflating values or something? I mean, would that be a high crime or misdemeanor that Congress would then dig into? Does that qualify?
Well, it certainly could. I mean, historically, again, you look at the most recent impeachment of President Clinton, it had to do with lying about an interpersonal affair that some people made the exact same argument. How would this be a high crime and a misdemeanor? But what that term really means is the person who is president fit for that office? And if we find that President Trump has inflated assets, has been a tax cheat, has had a history of acting improperly in his business, it tells us a lot about how he's operating in the current office, and it would be grounds for the Congress to decide that he's not fit for that office.
But the Clinton investigation wasn't about Jennifer Flowers or Paula Jones, what happened in the Excelsior, hotel room. It specifically legally centered on his false testimony, lying, for which he was disbarred.
Well, I think that's a little bit of a revision of history. I mean, what we know now is that Judge Starr was very involved with the lawyers for the Flowers team, that they had sort of ginned this up over a period of time, which I think brings us to the point that impeachment is a political act. It is not a criminal investigation. And so that depends really on how Congress feels about a president. And you can find things, and certainly there are things this president has done that Democrats could try to impeach him for. And the question is whether they can build any sort of public support for that, and that's the more difficult proposition.
Well, during that long testimony that Michael Cohen gave, he was asked about business practices by the Trump Organization. He talked about alleged inflating of values for insurance purposes and deflating for tax purposes. And of course, there's the question about the Deutsche Bank loan from that organization. And they're talking about Alan Weisselberg, the CFO, for many decades being called in to testify. Here's some of the questioning of Mr. Cohen when he said that the federal prosecutors in New York were going through some of this stuff.
Is there any other wrongdoing or illegal act that you are aware of regarding Donald Trump that we haven't yet discussed today?
Yes, and again, those are part of the investigation that's currently being looked at by the Southern District of New York.
And separately, Adam Schiff, the Democratic representative from California on the Intelligence Committee, this is what he said after Mr. Cohen testified behind closed doors to that committee.
This has obviously been an excruciating time for him, and we're very grateful that he was as forthcoming as he was. We made the same admonishment that my colleague, Chairman Cummings, made so eloquently, much more eloquently than I, that he needed to tell us the full truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And none of the questions we had for him went unanswered.
None of the questions we had for him went unanswered. It seems like Mr. Cohen is offering a lot. Do we have any indication, really, in terms of those details on what he has?
Well, one of the things that he said he can't talk about is communications between him and the president in the past few months. And so that there's certainly a suggestion that the president was trying to obstruct justice through communicating with Mr. Cohen, which is consistent with everything else he's done. I mean, the things that Cohen even publicly said in any of the prior 44 presidencies would have sunk the presidency, would have resulted into impeachment. So we're in a different age. The things that President Trump has both publicly admitted, acknowledged doing, the recent reporting about giving a security clearance to his son-in-law against the advice of all the intelligence agencies, there is a whole host of things, and one of those certainly is the Trump Organization and potential tax fraud.
Well, you know, the president's defenders say it's up to the president. I mean, he could give that type of clearance to someone he wants. He has that executive authority.
Sure. And the president could also launch a nuclear attack on the UK. It's certainly, he has the power to do those things. And one of the things that impeachment does is say, when you act in a manner that's outside of the interest of the United States, we have to rein that back in. And I think, again, we have to go back to the political question. What are the Democrats going to sort of sink their teeth into? And right now it looks like potential tax fraud and business dealings.
So if there is that, if there are indictments coming out of the Southern District, I mean, the president could say, I rely on all these accountants. I have $500 an hour lawyers, all these big fancy New York lawyers and accountants, and you know, I relied on them and trusted them to follow the letter of the law.
You know, he will say that, Eric, and he has made defenses like that all along. I think what's interesting about right now is that the president has had a press which has been pretty willing to go along with what he said and not challenge him. And so it's going to take sort of the free press to start to press the president and say, no, that's not reasonable. These things are not historical. They are out of line with what every other president has done. And until the press really does its job doing that, he's going to get away with arguments like that.
And so finally, Alex, as a former federal prosecutor, someone who's been in the trenches, and you've seen how these decisions are made, you know, what do you think is going to happen?
I think they are going to go after every financial crime they can find. I mean, the prosecutors in the Southern District of New York are not only very diligent and very good prosecutors, but they don't like when someone questions the rule of law. And I think they see it as a personal affront, the way the president has attacked the FBI, attacked the Department of Justice, attacked law enforcement. And so you've got some motivated people who are going to be very, very careful to make sure they get it right, but also make sure that they don't leave any stone unturned.
It has been often called the Southern District the preeminent U.S. Attorney's Office of the nation. They have targeted a variety of people and crimes over the many decades of its existence. Used to be run by Rudy Giuliani, among other law enforcement officials. We shall see what comes out of that office. Alex Little, thanks so much as always, of course. Barthel?
The